Hello and good afternoon. I'm Don Arleth and you're watching World News, coming to you live from Warsaw here on TVP World. After Poland elected a new president, Karol Nawrocki, backed by the opposition, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk announced on Tuesday that a vote of confidence for the government will be held as early as next week.
I addressed the leaders of the October 15th coalition during our meeting yesterday with the question of a vote of confidence in the government. Mr. Speaker Szymon Hołownia proposed that this item be voted on Wednesday, June 11th, which is a week from today. This vote of confidence is not an attempt to continue everything we have been doing, because we know well, after this year and a half, that some things can be done better, faster. And this vote of confidence should be a new opening. It should be offensive, not defensive. People will have different opinions, but I want you to know that for the entire October 15th coalition, it will be a day of new momentum. And I am confident that you will be up to the task.
Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski will pay an official visit to Berlin this Wednesday. He is set to meet with his German counterpart, Johann Wadephul, to discuss European security and continued support for Ukraine. According to the Polish Foreign Ministry, the two foreign ministers will take part in the opening ceremony of the Polish-German Forum at the Polish Embassy in Berlin. They will also present an award recognizing contributions to the development of Polish-German relations. The award honors individuals and institutions working to promote dialogue and cooperation between the two countries. U.S. Secretary of State Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth will travel to Belgium and France on June 5th and 6th. First, Hegseth will take part in the NATO Defense Ministers Summit in Brussels and then travel to Normandy for D-Day commemorations. A statement provided by the U.S. Department of Defense said that Pete Hegseth will echo President Donald Trump's call for increased defense spending among allied states. Since Donald Trump's re-election, Washington has been calling on NATO to increase the minimum defense spending bar to 5% of GDP. Experts also say that Hegseth's trip will likely result in him missing the Ukrainian Defense Contact Group meeting at NATO headquarters on June 4th. Ukraine dealt another blow to Moscow, striking the Kerch Bridge connecting Crimea with mainland Russia with an underwater explosion early on Tuesday morning, just days after it pulled off an elaborate drone operation that destroyed up to 30% of Russia's strategic bombing fleet.
Ukraine's security service, the SBU, announced on Tuesday that the 12-mile-long Kerch Bridge, a key supply route from the Russian mainland to occupied Crimea, was left in a, quote, state of disrepair after 1,100 kilograms of explosives were detonated beneath the bridge's underwater pillars in the early morning. No casualties were reported, but Russian forces temporarily closed the structure before reopening it to traffic by around 9 a.m. This is the third time the bridge has been targeted since 2022. This latest attack comes on the heels of a wave of Ukrainian drone strikes on Russian air bases over the weekend, and just one day after another round of unproductive peace talks between Kyiv and Moscow.
According to a poll by a Russian non-governmental research organization, the Levada Center, support for Moscow's war on Ukraine among Russians is the lowest it's been since the full-scale invasion began back in 2022. As of May of this year, only 28% of the Russian population supports Russia's war.
The same study shows that as many as 64% of the polled individuals support the notion of peace and negotiations with Ukraine. Among them, women, people below the age of 24, residents of smaller towns and villages, and those who think Russia is heading in the wrong direction. They were the biggest proponents of peace. As for those who support Russia's invasion of Ukraine, men, people above the age of 55, residents of Moscow, and those who are satisfied with where Russia's headed. They were the biggest supporters of continuing the war. The pollster also said that 87% of polled Russians were in favor of continuing peace talks with Ukraine. The Levada Center polled 1,613 Russians above the age of 18.
President Volodymyr Zelensky's chief of staff, Andriy Yermak, and other Ukrainian officials arrived in Washington, D.C. today to discuss sanctions, the bilateral minerals deal, and the return of kidnapped Ukrainian children. At the top of the list for the delegation are tougher U.S. sanctions against the Russian Federation. U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham recently sponsored a bill introducing new sanctions. But so far, President Donald Trump has not expressed an opinion on the matter. Also on the table for discussion is the bilateral minerals deal, which gives the United States preferential access to Ukrainian mineral projects and sets up a Ukrainian reconstruction fund. Details regarding reconstruction are yet to be finalized. One especially sore spot is the deportation of Ukrainian children to Russia. Ukraine presented Russia with a list of 400 children this week, but Russia only agreed to work on returning 10 of those on the list. Also overshadowing Yermak's visit to Washington today are the recent meetings in Istanbul, where Russia rejected the most recent ceasefire proposal. As a result, the Ukrainian delegation hopes to persuade U.S. officials that tougher sanctions are the best way to shorten the war. The Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD, announced today an expected downturn in the global economy. Economic output is expected to fall and inflation to rise as bilateral U.S. tariffs are implemented and consumer confidence weakens.
In the report, global growth is expected to slow to 2.9% from an earlier projection of 3.3%. The US is expected to be hit especially hard as output expectations weaken to a mere 1.1%, with bilateral tariffs in North America and China a large part of the equation. The OECD has raised inflation expectations worldwide from 3.7% to 4.2% due to slowing investment amid an environment of weakening consumer confidence. However, the report is not all doom and gloom. In the Visegrad bloc, projections are still up. Poland's GDP is expected to increase from a projected 2.9% to 3.3%. The Czech Republic is up from 1% to 1.9%, and Hungary from 0.5% to 0.9%, with inflation in all three countries holding steady.
It's possible if you undertake spending.
Representatives of parliaments from Nordic and Baltic countries are on an official trip to Sarajevo in Bosnia and Herzegovina. In their words, the parliament leaders are there to support the growing democracies as part of the Nordic Baltic 8 format. The NB8 group consists of Denmark, Estonia, Finland, Iceland, Latvia, Lithuania, Norway, and Sweden. During their trip, which concludes on June 4th, the representatives also shared their insights on the topic of EU accession for Bosnia and Herzegovina, which applied for membership in 2016 and was granted candidate status in 2022. The NB8 says Sarajevo ought to pursue the required reforms urgently, with the Speaker of the Swedish Parliament saying that Bosnia and Herzegovina's European accession path has been called into question in the West due to stagnation in the reform process. Germany is looking to bolster its cyber security following a cybercrime report suggesting that the country is often targeted by international cyber criminals and so-called hacktivists. According to the president of Germany's Federal Criminal Police Office, out of 20 arrest warrants, all of the perpetrators are currently in Russia. Germany's Federal Minister of the Interior, Alexander Dobrindt, said that in response to the rising number of foreign cyber criminals targeting Germany, the country will upgrade massively, legally, technically, and organizationally. These measures are said to help combat the cybersecurity threats more effectively in the future, though no concrete steps have been unveiled as of yet. The cybercrime report also suggests that the majority of foreign cyber criminals carry out their shadowy acts from Russia. And that concludes this edition of World News. Thanks for joining us, and stay tuned for more here on TVP World.